Thank you, Cornell, again for joining us today. I'm just so excited to have you as part of our inaugural virtual event, The Impact of DEI on Mental Health. And I think that getting to know you
Mhm.
and getting to hear your perspective has brought so much insight for me.
Mhm.
And I want to tell you like how I first got the impetus to reach out to you. Because I have friends at both Ginger and Headspace, and they were able to connect me because I had an opportunity to read two different reports.
Mhm.
The that came out in 2021. First, the state of employee mental health that came out from Headspace Health, and then the second one is the HR Leader's Guide to Making Mental Health Part of Your DEI Strategy. And it's a little bit embarrassing for me to say because I'm passionate about these two different issues,
Yeah.
but I hadn't before made the connection in that way of how integral both DEI and mental health are to each other. And when we have in our companies these two different strategies
Mhm.
going on, these two different initiatives going on, if we're not making them work together, I think we're really losing out on a lot of really fantastic work that can happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I love this topic, and I think you're not alone in not making the connection between these two things, because we tend to silo issues in very different buckets rather than seeing how they are a system and how they're all intertwined and have an impact on each other. So you're not alone, and together we're going to figure it out, and we're going to solve this issue for many employees who are hurting right now and looking for support that will help them be able to navigate and not just survive, but thrive in the world.
That's great. And I think you're right. It's something that we're doing together. And that's the magic
Yeah.
of how doing it in a really open and honest way allows people to work together and come together
Absolutely.
to make these kind of big changes that we're trying to make. And they are big changes.
Yeah.
Speaking of changes,
Uh,
you've had such an interesting career. And just to get started, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you moved from working in DEI in academia to now working in tech.
Yeah, yeah. I actually started my career as a ninth through 12th grade English teacher in Atlanta, Georgia, actually. And that was the first time diversity, equity, and inclusion became a part of what I did for a living. I started with professional development workshops for my fellow teachers about building belonging in the classroom for students and their unique needs. We worked in underserved communities, and so really understanding what our students needed and how the classroom could be a safe haven for them, in order to really learn and really get some amazing work done. So that was where I really got the bug to start DEIB and understanding it and really diving into the literature. And then I went and got a master's in higher education, and the emphasis of that program was social justice. And so I really started reading Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks and all the greats, right, around understanding how social issues and issues of racism and sexism and all the isms and sort of the systemic discrimination really impact our lives. And then worked at NYU and Cornell University, and really helping, working with students, but also we're helping faculty and staff understand how we embed DEIB into what we do, and then made that switch over into tech. And one of the reasons why is I just felt like the tech industry, while deals with some of the same issues that higher ed does or academia does, was really putting more effort, in my opinion, into the work of understanding inequality, and really putting in the resources for us to really begin to try some things and do some things in order to remedy some of these generational issues that we've been experiencing for quite some time. And so the energy was there, and I had the energy, and I said, it's time for me to make a pivot. I want to get in on that excitement of changing the world. Not to mention that a lot of these tech companies are impacting the way we live our lives. When you think about 15, 20 years ago, we weren't allowing people into our homes while we were away on vacation through Airbnb, right? We weren't putting our lives up on Instagram and Facebook. And so these tech companies literally changed the way we navigate the world. And I thought, if we could get these companies to understand diversity, equity, and inclusion, imagine how else we could change the world through their influence.
Absolutely right. And not only are we allowing both people into our homes and putting ourselves out on our screens, tech has become so immersive,
Right.
I think, that we are really allowing it into our minds,
Yeah.
right? To shape who we are and who we're becoming. And if it doesn't have that sort of positive perspective, especially on diversity and mental health for that matter,
Right.
we're going to be shaped by those environments that we're in.
That's right.
So I know one of the things that I've seen is that tech companies, Headspace Health specifically, have been really promoting diversity efforts.
Mhm.
And I think that it's such a great thing to see these companies take leadership in
Mhm.
this area, because they 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 are new. A lot of them are, and have the ability to, be what we think tech companies are: agile and progressive, and they have the ability to really do that, because some of them don't have the long history that other companies have, and kind of the challenges of steering that ship.
Right.
But I also know that some companies, while they may talk a good game
Mhm.
about their diversity efforts and wanting to do great things in the world, sometimes it's really harder uh, for that to happen in action. And I'm curious to hear, you don't have to uh, make anybody feel bad, but
Right. Right. Right.
what have you been some of your experiences in coming against some of the challenges that have been there in order to make these changes?
Absolutely. I think you hit on something that's really, really important, and something I've been talking about for a number of years now, that there is a difference between awareness, there's a difference between an appreciation and an understanding of why diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is important, and actually doing something about it. And what I find, and with many clients I've worked with many organizations I've worked for, that when you get in and start doing the work, there's this disconnect of like, wait, I know we said we wanted to do this, and this is the kind of this utopia that we're trying to create, but I didn't know we had to do that in order to get there. It's like, yeah, we've got to change the way we do things. We got to resituate systems and processes and ways of thinking in order to reach that vision that we all agreed that we wanted to get to. So there is a disconnect between what we want to be and how we actually, what we have to do and actually to get there, which to me is one of the biggest barriers. I liken it to, I want to lose weight, right? There's some, I'm not in the best of shape. And so I'm trying to get back into the gym. I hired a trainer. I want to do it. I know I need to do it, but the action it takes to get there, I'm like, oh, I don't know that I can do that, right? I got to change my eating habits, but I love ice cream, right? I know I need to do these things to get to that vision that I'm looking for, but when it actually comes time to do it, I make up all the excuses as to why. And I think that's exactly the same way that we're seeing within organizations across different industries. There is a complete disconnect. And I do believe that there are many people, many leaders who in theory believe in the vision that we keep talking about, but when it comes time to do certain things, because it requires us to relinquish privilege, to relinquish power in order to make it happen, that's where we really get into a lot of trouble, because people fear that and what that means, right? And what change looks like. So I think that's a big barrier to our true success in making advancement in this area.
Yeah, I can really see that. And I'm curious because what we're talking about today is really that intersection between and those parallels between DEI and mental health.
Right.
Do you see some of the same challenges in sort of changing people's minds or getting people on board for mental health as well?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You know, I think that the barrier around mental health alone is that the organization, like DEI, doesn't understand its role in the issue, right? So many organizations, many leaders are of the mind that their job isn't to be social justice warriors. Their job is to make business, right? And so they lack the understanding of how DEIB intersects with that work as stewards, as people within the society, as organizations situated in a community, right, where we oftentimes displace people with the building of our buildings and making housing expensive, right? There's a DEIB issue or DEIB intersection with how we do business. And I think it's the same thing with mental health, understanding that we want people's personal lives to be so outside of the workplace that we don't understand that those things don't leave or sit at the door when we come into the building or come into the virtual Zoom room, right? And so I think workplaces are trying to understand what is our locus of control and where does our line end of where our responsibility is to support mental health. Is it just benefits? Is it just providing really good healthcare so people have access to therapists and coaches and things of that sort? And so I think that's the struggle that I've seen, is how far do I go as an employer in being involved in the mental health of my employees? And I think the conversation that we've seen is that the mental health issues aren't just happening, or the impetus for the mental health concerns isn't just happening outside the workplace, it's happening in the workplace, right? As a Black queer man, I'm not just dealing with racism and homophobia outside of the workplace, I also deal with it in-house as well. So the workplace is a part of the situation and therefore has much more, or needs to have much more involvement in how we impact the mental health of the people who work for us.
Exactly. And it speaks to the fact that work has become so integrated in our lives, especially as so many people have transferred to working from home.
For sure.
Those boundaries aren't very clear. And I think especially for us who have come out of this millennial generation, where we want our work to be meaningful.
Right.
We want to be passionate about what we do. And so our work does really become part of our identity, that it becomes even more important to have those things taken care of in that place, in our workplace, as well as our home life.
In the room to be able to have that balance. Right? Create the situation where if I need to go run an errand, go to the eye doctor, take care of my health, go to the gym, go for a walk, that I work for a culture that allows me that space to actually do that. And to be honest, I really think that we've always had work integrated into our personal lives, even before the pandemic, right? It's just now been brought to light more. People were working, we spend more time at work with our colleagues than we do in our own homes with our families. That's always been the case, right? Now we're home more because we're not commuting and actually physically leaving our spaces, but work has always been a major part of our lives. Now we're really understanding it, and people are like, whoa, wait a minute. This is really, there's a major imbalance here between how much time I spend on the job, how much I earn, right, in my career advancement, and the quality of life that I'm living. And I think people are really starting to figure out, no, that's not what I want anymore. And that's what's making this such a big topic, in my opinion, but it's always been there.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think too, it's been like that awareness of that very issue is a big reason why there's been so much push from younger generations to really make these changes.
That's right.
And in a lot of places, these younger generations that are coming into the workforce are big drivers of change organizationally, even though they may not have, the power of being an executive or being in senior leadership. So it is really fascinating and also great to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of changes in the workplace, Headspace Health is a merger between Headspace, a meditation technology company, and Ginger, which is a therapy, mental health, pure mental health company. And you started right before that merger happened, correct?
Yeah, like many months before, actually. Yeah, yeah.
And I was really excited to see this because both Headspace and Ginger are two of my favorite companies out there. So it was really great to see. It's like when your friends get married or something.
Right. I love it.
But I know that like both companies, um, one had a passion for diversity and inclusion. Two had a really strong passion for mental health and wanting to make changes of how we approach our mental health and how we treat our mental health, and really strong teams. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective what it's been like to bring those two companies together, those two teams together, because on the one hand, you have a lot of alignment,
Right.
but on the other hand, whenever you do that, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be things that come up that make those kinds of changes difficult.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and I think anyone, listening or watching this will understand, and who have been through an acquisition or a merger, understand how difficult it is to bring two companies together, because you have different systems, you have different processes, you have different ways of going about the work that require you to really sit down, listen to each other, and understand where each side is coming from in order to bring together into one entity. So one of the biggest challenges was like you had strong identity on both sides, and neither identity really wanted to lose itself in creating this new organization. And so we had to really take, in my opinion, from a DI perspective, take pieces of both sides of this merger to say, how do we come together to make this new thing that is representative of who both organizations are, right? Or were. And so there's lots of conversation and dialogue and active listening, which can be a challenge in a space where you constantly want to move, but really taking the time to go, no, we want to make sure we're doing this right, and that we're listening to our people and listening to, even our customers around, how, what their needs are, and infusing that into the new identity, which is Headspace Health. And then also recognizing that whatever DEIB work we do needs to ladder up to the overall business strategy, because it needs to be embedded into the business strategy. So allowing our C-suite leaders to do their work and to really create the vision and the values around how we do what we do, and then taking that work and understanding, okay, so how do we lay over DEIB into every area of this in order to really make sure that it is woven throughout and not just something that is happening tangentially or parallel to the business strategy, but really embedded into it. So figuring all that out and wanting to move was a big challenge, at least for me. I'm a little impatient. And so I like to go, let's go. But really having to step back and go, no, we've got to make sure we're doing this right, and make sure that we have everything in place to be able to do it right. So some of the more tactical things that were challenges were just merging of our systems, right? You have employees in one database, employees in another database. In order for me to understand what our workforce looks like and where we really have some areas of opportunity, that data was critical. And so getting to a point where it was all together was definitely a big challenge, but we've overcome it. We have a great team of people that I work with, and really helping to bring Headspace Health to life as one big entity.
Fantastic. And it's really great to hear, because when you're going through changes like that, it's easy for some things to get lost,
right?
Especially if people aren't driving to continue them. And I think one of those can be, a DEI initiative, or a focus in a certain area. And what I've really loved, and hopefully it won't embarrass you, because we have Headspace through my company, through Mentera, and you have a really fantastic video on the app right now.
Yeah.
Just really enjoyed it. And of course, getting to see your face on the screen is really fantastic too. But I was really pleased to see how Headspace Health is continuing this focus
Right.
on integrating DEI and mental health. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're really thinking about building it into the product and bringing it into people's lives in that way.
Absolutely. I think one of the major things is representation, right? We know that when it comes to finding a therapist, when it comes to finding a coach, when it comes to really consuming media in general, people are craving representation, seeing themselves, because it helps them feel like the person that they're working with or listening to understands their unique experiences, right? And so we're paying close attention to the diversity of our therapists, diversity of our coaches, and the diversity of our meditation teachers, and really looking at how we build in that diversity, and also reaching the people who we're currently not reaching through meditation, right? And recognizing that there are different cultural barriers that prevent groups from accessing and talking about mental health first and foremost. So having someone who looks like them, who is representative of who they are, is one of the steps in helping to develop authentic relationships with the communities that we want to serve, and continued representation of the communities that we currently serve. And so that's really, really important for us. And I think the other thing is just the quality of care as well, and really having a conversation around making sure that our therapists and our coaches are experienced and educated in being able to support various populations like LGBTQ individuals, trans individuals, people with disabilities, people at different stages of their life, and understanding that, right? So having those resources there makes sure that we can meet people where they are and meet people through their very unique situations and help provide the best quality services that we possibly can. So we're very human-centered. That's the phrase that we talk about all the time, like a human-centered approach to everything that we do. And we also try and do that internally as well. So looking at our engagement surveys, looking at how our employees are being impacted by the work and through the business, so that they can show up in their best way. So we've implemented various things for our employees to make sure that we're also taking care of them as well. And we're always in conversation around what else that might look like in order to really show up for them as they show up for our customers.
It's fantastic. And what representation does, as you said, is it really builds trust
Yeah.
with different communities, especially in those places where maybe you're trying to bring something new and bring people into an area that they may not have experienced before. That trust is so important to like building that connection and helping people to feel safe and comfortable in inhabiting a new space.
That's right. Yeah.
Um,
Having that representation and then having the content to back it up, right? Because the
Absolutely.
representation is one thing, but okay, if I see another Black man or a Black woman or a Latina woman or Asian person, right? Like, okay, that gets me to come into the app and go, wow, there's someone there who looks like me. But then the content also has to exist that represents my unique situations as well. And so we're also thinking through what is that content that will also speak to those experiences too.
Yeah. But that can be hard, It's
Yeah.
one thing to say this is what we want, but when it comes to the reality of sourcing talent
Mm-hmm.
and finding the right people,
Mm-hmm.
how do you guys go about making sure that those maybe goals in terms of bringing in diverse viewpoints and bringing in diverse talent
Right.
match up with what actually happens?
Yeah, yeah. So I think for us, it's about, and I think with any organization, it really has to be about understanding where we are right now, right? And so that data, going back to that data, where are we currently? And then what are the systems and the culture pieces, the processes that might be barriers to us having a more diverse workforce, right? Or more diverse representation in the app, right? What are the systemic reasons that might exist that prevent us from advancing in that way? Without an understanding of that, and a willingness to do things differently, we'll never achieve the level of diversity that we're trying to achieve. And I think that's one of the barriers that many organizations struggle with, is like, in theory, yes, diversity is amazing. We want it, absolutely. But when it comes down to looking at the real nitty gritty of like, okay, so where are we now? How did we get here, right? What were the systems and the decisions and the attitudes and the cultures that got us here? And then what are those same things that are preventing us from getting where we actually said we just want to be? And that's super, super critical. And so we're looking at, for example, from my talent acquisition standpoint, what are the partners that we need to have, right? What are the actual steps and the systems that are currently in place that we got to go, yeah, that needs to be switched out. So we're training our managers, and we're getting ready to launch an inclusive hiring training about what does that look like? And then there's accountability. How do we hold managers accountable to actually following that process? And so we have a vice president for talent acquisition who's all about holding people accountable and really doing the hard work of saying, no, we cannot move forward with that process because look at your pipeline. Look at, how are we reaching out to the communities that we know your team lacks in order to make sure that we're creating an equitable opportunity for folks from different backgrounds to be able to join our team, right? So being willing to say, nope, we can't move forward until this is right. That is a hard decision to make. And that's how we are really putting our flag in the sand and say, this matters to us. And we're willing to pause in order to get there.
That is so helpful, because I know that is a challenge that so many people, even if your heart is in the right place, right? Actually putting it to paper and putting it into action is much harder, and having those real strategies. So I'm definitely going to come back to you and get some of those resources that you guys
good, very good.
and see if I could share them.
Yeah.
This was really fantastic. I've so enjoyed getting to hear more of your perspective, and getting to hear all of the really great things that Headspace Health is doing at this intersection of, I think, two of the most important issues of our time, which is hard to say because there's so many. So many important issues. So I will say thank you. I've really appreciated this and look forward to hearing more from you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Cornell.
Thank you.